Hello and welcome to this episode of Public Health Network Cymru's podcast. I'm Helen Green.
And I'm Saran Anwar.
Gambling is increasingly being seen as a public health issue due to the impact it has on individuals, families and communities. The National Assembly for Wales's research team published a blog about the issue earlier this year, along with figures that suggest that 1.1% of the population in Wales are problem gamblers. Problem gamblers often find that their habit adversely affects their home or work life but feel powerless to stop. Figures from the 2017 conference on excessive gambling in Wales show that an average of £675 per adult in Wales is spent on fixed odds betting terminals, with each machine taking an average of £3,000 per day.
We got in touch with the team who run the Beat the Odds Gambling Addiction Support Service in Cardiff. Winfred Ellis-Owen is the Chief Executive Officer and provides his views on the approaches that should be used with people attempting to overcome addictions. The service is based at the Living Room in Roath, a voluntary sector organisation.
My name is Winfred Ellis-Owen and I'm the Chief Executive of Living Room Cardiff. And Living Room Cardiff is a community-based recovery centre that has an all addictions approach. By that I mean that we deal with alcohol, drugs, substance misuse, but also behavioural addictions as well, such as sex addiction, gambling, of course, and eating disorders and things like this. When a young man gets drunk before going to a party, he's basically arranging things so that he doesn't have to be himself at that party, isn't he? So the question is not why does he drink or take drugs or gamble or engage in other harmful behaviours. The real question is, why does he feel the need to flee from himself? What is it that's so dreadful, so awful, that he has to be in an altered state, that he can't be authentic, he can't be real, he can't be true to nature? So that's what we tend to focus on at the Living Room. But we don't have that hierarchical approach, the doctor-patient relationship. We come alongside people at the Living Room. We befriend them. Because we're all cracked here. We're all perfectly imperfect. There's no judgment at all being made here. Nobody criticises anybody here. We put people in the driving seat. They drive their own recovery bus. And we sit on the back seat, pay for the petrol and come along for the ride. We also do the gambling conference here once a year. This will be our 4th year now, and that's going from strength to strength. I hope next year to make it a more international event, perhaps bring in some live feeds from across the world, or alternatively, if we can find some funding, to bring some people over. I did bring a guy over from Australia a few years ago, but I can't keep doing that every year.
I noticed in the programme for the conference that it mentioned that there's similar gambling problems in Australia to in Wales.
Well, the relationship with the Victorian Responsible Gambling Foundation came about because Professor Jim Orford, who's one of the experts in this field, an academic, and has been campaigning for years and has written 2 books on gambling, suggested that Australia here would be an example of best practice. So we got in touch with them and we've formed a strategic partnership with them, and they've come over, they've helped us, they've shared some data with us and some of the research that they've done, and I think they've prevented us from repeating some of the mistakes that they did. So they've been very, very helpful. And from the start, when I started the Beat the Odds service, I realised that we needed to get the academics and the researchers in. So we have a very powerful steering group that I'm very proud of, and they've been with us throughout and being strengthened all the time. Professor Rebecca Cassidy from London University Goldsmith is joining us now as well, and she has said that she sees more hope, more positivity around the Welsh Assembly here, of some political action being taken in Wales rather than any other of the home countries. So they have contributed immensely to the work we do here, and they've kept us on track and kept us in touch with the latest developments, and of course they carry out their own research. We've carried out some research into the most effective interventions, psychological interventions. The result there was that no particular intervention worked, but the treatment works. So it's all about
what do you mean by treatment?
Well, the way you treat people, that's treatment. It's the way you treat people, as simple as that. This is why when you look around the living room, it's comfortable, it's got flowers here, it's a nice place. Anybody would love to be in this environment. And, people are taken aback when they come here and they see how nice it is.
Yeah, we commented on that when we came in as well, actually, of how fresh it looks in here.
Yes. Well, I like to treat people as I would like to be treated myself. That's all it is, really. And what we try, We also had a workshop and a retreat here where they help some of the staff understand better some of the issues. Why is gambling such a problem in Wales? It's been a hidden problem in Wales. It is one of the many ways that we use to stupefy ourselves. We live in a materialistic society, sadly. We judge people accordingly, and this is very, very bad. So people think that money and things like this really will substitute for many other things that are lacking in their lives. I don't know. I think we find our drug of choice, and gamblers find their drug of choice, because usually it mimics best what's missing in their lives. I talked to a gambler the other day, asked him, what is it that you get out of gambling? And he told me, when I'm in that zone, he said, there's no tomorrow, no yesterday, no consequences, no money worries, no health worries, no nothing, just the bet. I mean, that's what they're looking for. And the one that best mimics that then tends to be their drug of choice, which is an unfortunate name, but that's the one that they think is the solution to their problems. And common sense tells them then, you see, do it again. Why should you feel out of sorts, like a square peg in a round hole, outside that window looking in where life goes on inside this room, when all you have to do is take a bet and be instantly transformed and be part of the whole excitement, be exactly where you want to be. So they tend to use gambling as a way of doing something for them that they can't really do by themselves. I call addiction mummism, to a lesser extent dadism. Most of the damage is imposed on us -9 months to about 6 years of age. That's when these core beliefs are implanted. This is my world view. This is how I see myself in relation to the rest of the world. Something happens to us when we are teenagers that reaffirms these core beliefs, and around about 18, 19, 20, thereabouts, some event, some crisis, something happens that concretes them in place, and they become our core beliefs. And these core beliefs are harmful and injurious to us because they tend to be negative. And if you keep asking the question, if that is true, what does that mean? It tends to end up with you saying, I might as well kill myself. Somewhere along the line, these people have lost the will to live. Somewhere along the line. And you'll find that addiction is a slow, drawn-out form of suicide. That somewhere along the line they've lost the will to live. So by its very nature, it's negative, rooted in negativity. It's an illness that tells you you're not good, you're not worthy, you don't deserve anything. So we have to impose positivity on ourselves. We have to teach ourselves to become positive and develop a positive outlook on life. And this is where we learn to challenge the negative thoughts. And
you do that through both the group sessions and the one-to-ones as well? The
one-to-ones, the group sessions, everything is repeated. It's about imposing positivity. It's about instigating hope and getting them to realize that the biggest lie of all is that they can't stop doing this. Is the biggest lie of all. Of course they can stop doing it, but they believe the lies that they tell themselves. They believe that they can't stop gambling. They believe that they can't stop taking drugs. They believe that they can't do this. And the grave danger here is that society becomes sick in the process, because the family itself, you see, maintains the illness. The family don't want, for natural reasons, they don't want to see their loved ones get into trouble, end up in jail or in hospital or what have you. So they intervene and they cover up for them, they tell lies for them, they pay their bills and so forth. What they do is maintain the illness. And what they do is stop the addict from having to deal with the consequences of their behaviour. Now, we're hearing quite often now about these places they're setting up, they're thinking of setting up for drug addicts, where they are encouraged to go and take drugs safely. Well, yes, but what they're doing is repeating the behaviour of the family. They are maintaining the illness, and it's totally at odds with my philosophy. You know, it's about people's ability to get well, to recover. Recovery should be made attractive. It should be said that it's achievable and realistic, and a goal that people can and do achieve. Not maintaining the illness, that doesn't help anybody. But what you're doing is preventing the addict from having to deal with the consequences of their behavior. And that, quite often, is the only way that they will change their ways. When the suffering, potentially the greatest creative force in nature, becomes enough, then people are prepared to change.
Could you tell us a bit about the demographics of the people who you see here at the living room? So, for example, the split of male to female and the average age?
The split is about 60-40%, perhaps closer than that, maybe 45%, 55% in favour of males over women. And that gap is closing year on year, incidentally. More and more women are coming forward now, recognising their need of help.
What do you think it is that's causing more women to take up gambling? My own perception is that it's through things like Foxy Bingo being advertised on mainstream TV. Has that got something to do with it?
I'm sure it has, and operating from the home as well, of course. It's the availability, isn't it, that makes it so difficult or so easy, really, for people to engage in this kind of behaviour. And it's a quick buck, isn't it? Society now at the moment, people are stretched financially and finding it very, very difficult. It becomes very tempting if you see this flashed in your and of course it's only the positive things that are flashed. It's the possibility that we can create our own heaven instantly like that, and solve all our problems in an instant, and everything will be hunky-dory. We live in that make-believe world. I think a lot of people live in that make-believe world. So it's a very dangerous place to be and to exist. We want life to be up there, fantastic, happy, joyous, free, all the time. That's where we want to be, happy. But that's not reality. Life doesn't exist there, much as truth. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. And likewise, life is a little happy, a little sad. You can't aspire to these extremes all the time. Because for every high point, there is a low point as well, and when it swings back into depression and melancholia, of course, you can stay there after time. The more often you do it, the pendulum kind of stays around the depressive, melancholic state. And even with the most powerful drugs, it'll only take you to a little happy temporarily, and then back to the depressed state.
From looking at bits and pieces from the conference, I saw that younger people are now more able to access online gambling. So there was a suggestion that there's more young people gambling than perhaps what there was 10 years ago, where they would have needed to go to somewhere in person, as it were.
Yeah, students as well, a high percentage of students are gambling. We try to engage with some of the services at the universities here. They have an emergency fund for people who run out of money. And a condition of that is that they have to hand in their bank statements and so forth so they can have a look. And of course what they find quite often is that these betting companies take a lot of money out. But once the money is given and the short-term solution is given, then they don't see them again. You see, they go on with their courses and there's no other intervention that they can follow up with that. But it's quite true. That is at the root of most people who have financial difficulties at college. There's some form of gambling at the root of it. Sport, of course, is another one. And also people who have a lot of time on their hands hanging around, where you might train for a long, long time or for a short time intensively and then have a lot of free time on your hands, and also more money that you can possibly spend. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that you know these what you call these companies that lend money in this
payday loans.
Payday loans, that people who borrow the most, they are professional footballers. At the beginning of the week they take out thousands and thousands and then put it back at the end of the week once they get paid. So I don't know. We're all of us somehow fleeing from reality in some way or another. And we all of us, when you think about it, we're on that continuum somewhere.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about people with gambling addictions, or how people find themselves in that situation?
The biggest problem is that it's the guilt and shame that surrounds it at the moment. And it's back where alcohol was in the 50s and 60s of the last century. People are afraid to come forward. People are afraid to look for help because they think they'll be judged, there are people who think less of them and so forth. But I don't think there's a family anywhere in Wales that hasn't in some way, been affected by the misuse of alcohol, drugs or gambling or some other form of addictive behaviour. Either in the immediate family or certainly in the community, we all know people. And I think the biggest obstacle to dealing with this guilt and shame really are the addicts themselves, because they're afraid to open up. And there's immense freedom in opening up, by the way. I did it myself, one of the first ones in Wales really to start talking about my addiction openly, and immense goodwill. That's all I've had throughout. Support and goodwill, and but for some reason they are terrified, and society itself is so ignorant of the facts around addiction that they operate on ignorance as well. So it's all about educating people to the reality of what it's about. People are dying of addiction and nobody's talking about it. I can name you, but I won't. People who are national figures in Wales who have died recently, who died because of alcoholism, but nobody talks about it. The media doesn't talk about it, their friends don't talk about it, nobody talks about it. And if they died of cancer, they'd be running marathons and doing all kinds of things. But because it's this, nobody talks about it. With the AIDS epidemic, they clicked it straight away. They realized that they had to talk about it and bring it out of the shadows and bring it out to public awareness. And they've done that with positive outcomes. But here, of course, we're still back in the 50s and 60s of the last century. And it keeps people sick. People and families are dying on their feet because they're terrified of coming forward. Because what will people think? What will people say? Well, damn what people think. Damn what people say. Come forward and look for help. Because they're just human, and these things happen to human beings. There are 3 rules that apply wherever there is addiction. Nobody talks about it. Everybody knows it's there, like an elephant in the middle of the room, but everybody walks on eggshells around pretending it's not there. So some radical change has to happen, and we have to make it easier for people to come forward and ask for help.
And to finish off, do you have any key messages for policymakers who might be listening when they're making decisions around gambling and addiction in particular?
Well, it is a problem, isn't it? It's a huge problem, and I'm so pleased to see that the Chief Medical Officer recognises this as a public health issue. It's so nice to have somebody come from outside with a different perspective and, see things as they really are, rather than that whole attitude, this is the way things are and there's nothing much we can do to change things, He comes in with let's do something about this. And I'm so pleased that his report now is going to be highlighting the difficulties in Wales with gambling. The message of hope is that people can and do recover, and that there is a way out of addiction. If you're suffering, you're bound to be in emotional pain. Nobody enjoys these behaviors. The message is there is a way out. There is hope. All you've got to do is recognize your need of help and just ask for it. It has to come from you. And just ask for it, and then we'll do the rest. We'll work with you in order to resolve this most invidious of illness.
If you'd like to be involved with future episodes of this podcast, please get in touch by emailing publichealth.network@wales.nhs.uk or tweeting us at PH Network Cymru.